Hello and welcome to CryptOMG. Let's dive into some things. Today I want to talk about a little bit of price action. It's something I've been avoiding a lot this week because it's obviously sucked. It makes you look at it and go, OMG. But we got to take note of what's happening because it does dictate a lot of how the industry continues to progress. Of course, what we're seeing now is a lot of short-term elements, and what I'm about to discuss in this episode should be taken as near-term. This is definitely not long-term. I will remain bullish on Bitcoin and crypto in the long run all the time. However, if we want to dive in quickly, let's pull up some charts. This is Hyperliquid. It's a new DEX, or arguably a centralized exchange on chain. But it is very amazing, and it has proven to have tremendous volume over this past downturn. So that's a really interesting thing for me to see, something on-chain having competitive volume to a centralized exchange. Could be looked at as a big deal. It's certainly an interesting product to test the water, and it's been an exciting resource for me. So I want to just look at, we've had Bitcoin. I'm looking at the 1 hour chart here, just so you know. This is 1 hour. This is like a day trader's chart. You're looking at this if you're looking to see what is the price change hour by hour. Each one of these ticks, green, red, represents 1 hour period. So I am looking fairly short term, right? However, if we go back, and what are we looking at? Different days here in January, and basically 24 ticks taking up an entire day, as you can see, January 8th to January 9th, as I move and progress. My first posting, or my posting earlier this week on January 7th, was like, huzzah, we're over six figures. And then, of course, immediately following that, we have this dramatic trip down. Definitely not my fault, but you never know. Who knows? Maybe I'm a counter signal. And what really kind of sucked is what we saw play out time over the next really couple days. So what was happening here was that you have to realize there's major institutional players that are accruing Bitcoin. There are things like BlackRock who are buying and selling Bitcoin. Of course, they are not doing this as a cohesive singular unit. They are an asset manager. So the people who are holding assets inside of BlackRock are trying to exit or purchase. Now, that means that even though you'll see things like BlackRock outflows, BlackRock inflows, that's really a broad market mechanic, not saying that BlackRock themselves are sitting there thinking, let's execute on this. However, there are specific players like market makers who oversee a lot of tokenized assets. They sit on a ton of liquidity, both for tokens and USDC, USDT, stablecoins, and their goal is to try to establish a parameter within a market. Now, they do that for profitability. So one thing that we do begin to see is that as we kind of paid attention over the week, and this was something I was following, the sellers came out really heavily. And they started to really jam down in here. And what that means is that they were creating selling under the auspices that we would continue to go lower. The selling begets the selling. It creates a downward trend. People get scared, they get terrified, and really this is a market dynamic to kind of explore what is the bottom, right? Unfortunately, you know, we've been looking at this like $90,000 number here, 91,000, and this did actually go a little bit lower than our previous low. A lower low is never a great thing. We want to see higher highs and higher lows, right? Basically trending upwards in a market. Even if it's going up and down, we want to see that the maximum and minimum are switch in my finger diagram are actually trending in the direction that we want to see. Now, we've gotten down pretty low, and it seems we hit kind of a well of saturation on how deep this market wanted to go. And I woke up this morning to quite a pleasant surprise. We see this uptrend really here, January 9th to the 10th. Of course, we're here in between the 11th. And the market is now at the upper bounds of this 1 hour parameter. So these blue lines here, they're Bollinger Bands, are really just averages, and they're trying to create some sort of theoretical constraint as to where the price goes. It can go way outside of both of these things, but that's generally something that is an easy viewpoint. Now, if I switch it over to 1 day, right, where each of these candles represents a single day, you get a bit of a different picture, right? You can see that in the near term, the Bollinger Band was pressing against the top. Here, we're just kind of flirting with the bottom, coming right off the bottom of the Bitcoin chart. Now, it did touch the halfway point. This is like the median pricing on the 1 day scale. And that was something that obviously caused a little fear. So anyway, this is all fun trading things, something to learn about. There's people that are much more experienced in this regard, and I'm sure to talk about some of this in the future as we do unpack trading. But there's got to be reasons for this, right? These things are all, astrology charts, and they augur in a certain way, but they're responses to a broader market. Now, one of the things that I really want to touch on as we go through it is, why is this all happening? Well, this is very reflective to the macro markets. We've been seeing fall-offs in equity. We've been seeing fall-offs in a lot of asset classes outside of the crypto universe. And of course, a lot of this is related to what is called the VIX, the volatility index. They call this the fear index. Basically, it's a metric of volatility. And as we look at this, I got April, July, October, we can see this huge spike. So we've been through this before, but we're seeing an uptick again. And that's kind of what is leading the trend, really. This is kind of a summary, I would say, of the macro of everything. But we have these lovely charts brought to you by Yahoo Finance, which shows the Fed funds target rate coming in a little bit lower. Same with economic events, GDP final, right? We're seeing a prior GDP final going up. So let's get a little bit more in terms of what's going on right now. Economic data, manufacturing employment index. The prior is a little bit higher than the new. Same with the broader economic outlooks. These are really all employment data points as we look at right here. And the unemployment rate being a little bit lower than we expected. Now, this is not really bad news in the long scape, but as of now, it's just kind of contributing to some of the confusion that we're seeing moving forward as we transition again into new administrations. So one thing we can see as we open the US T-bill yields is that there is a spike in the 10-year, meaning that people are really moving into this unsure position, right? They want to lock liquidity into something that generates yield in a long-term time frame. That means they're looking to avoid short-term pain, long-term gain. This can be seen again. We've kind of come off the VIX and looking at a flight to safety, if you will. I had mentioned before that I think a lot of the chaos right now is to drive up the prices here, because one of the tools in the coffer that Trump will have is to actually start deflating the dollar, again, making long-term holders of the dollar exposed to more risk. And this allows him to kind of have some leverage over what's going on here. All of these things are very indicative towards long-term elements, but they can have impacts on short-term pricing. Now, I will say the positive thing is that if we look at some really fun points coming out, just getting off of the short term, I actually think the market right now is pretty terrible. I would not advise you entering or exiting for any long-term position. My take will always be every day is a good day to buy Bitcoin. Don't try to catch knives, as you will, because there's just too much volatility, and I don't even think the professionals necessarily have a firm grip on what's happening here. In the long term, I believe Bitcoin is going to $1 million. I will repeat that all day, every day, and we'll look a little bit as to why. And again, I found this great thread today as I was looking for just a couple different points, and it sort of collated everything I was really thinking, which is about the global adoption of nation states regarding Bitcoin. We can talk nation states. We can also talk US states, because I'm going to get into that in a little bit. But I'm just going to rely on HODL 15 Capital here, because this is just such a useful and concise consolidation of everything. But if we look at El Salvador, obviously, it's just something I mentioned previously. El Salvador is just crushing it, right? They've had this long-term view on buying Bitcoin. They purchased a lot of it back in the recession, or I should say the Bitcoin bear market, and it's proving very useful to them. Of course, we have Trump in Nashville, so this goes back a little ways. I want to actually bring it a little more up to speed, which here you have Japan even talking about a Bitcoin reserve. Guys, this is utterly insane. We have Senator Cynthia Lummis out of Wyoming who's discussed it. I think the Bitcoin reserve is rather a contentious topic. I personally don't understand why the United States would want to accrue Bitcoin in particular. It is a bet against the US dollar. However, the counter to that argument would be, if we believe that this asset is going to hold weight, is going to be a digital gold, there's no reason why the US would want to have no exposure to it. In my personal opinion, I think we should just keep the Bitcoin that we got from the Silk Road, which was, again, a black market that was taken down many years ago, and the United States government has been holding on to their Bitcoin reserves. So, but let's get back to a little bit more on the global adoption of Bitcoin, because this stuff is pretty nuts. You actually have, this is a great clip, and I remember this from a while ago. This was posted on January 1st, but it's the outgoing finance minister of Germany just calling out the ridiculousness. Keep in mind, they've been destroying their nuclear power plants in a time where I think the best and most investable classes are energy, compute, and intelligence, being chips, right? So everything that AI fundamentally requires, large swaths of energy, is going to come from nuclear. And you can see that with Microsoft trying to revive 3 Mile Island, as well as the chips themselves. You can see that with the success of the CHIPS Act, NVIDIA, TSMC in the United States beginning to outperform chip production over Taiwan. That's like really very cool in my opinion. And you just have this outgoing finance minister calling them all kind of bums for ignoring what I think is a very new and powerful asset class. As we move on, Poland presidential candidate calls for the strategic national Bitcoin reserve. I mean, guys, this is utterly insane coming from where I started, which was buying Bitcoin in back alleys from sketchy people. There's something here in Russia, and I can just skip that, but creating a strategic reserve of Bitcoin in Russia. I mean, these are words just being spoken. Action is completely different. But of course, you have Switzerland kind of taking this approach, and I think that sort of makes sense for who they are. There's probably plenty of Bitcoin stored in Swiss vaults. Brazil, obviously, being very close to El Salvador and kind of having that relationship. And I do think that the success of El Salvador will be a contagion. Others adjacent will see their success. Obviously, a lot of bullish change has been happening there, a reformation of an immaculate variety, both in crime and in economy. And that's going to be a boilerplate, actually, I should say a template for other people to copy off of and to reproduce. Now, Hong Kong legislature, I have actually gone over to Hong Kong, been doing a lot of work with them. They were in a competitive race against our SEC to release a lot of the Bitcoin ETF launches, a lot of things around digital securities and bringing a lot of the financial market online. So Hong Kong is actually a very bleeding edge mover, and they can basically be looked at as a test bed for broader China. Now, there's still a split there, and I don't know if everyone's fully aware of the relationship between mainland China and Hong Kong, as they do actually grow closer together, but it is a very unique economic zone that's allowed to experiment. Bhutan, I've talked about this and I can't talk about it enough because it's just so freaking cool. But, you know, Bhutan with a population of 775,000 accumulated over 12,000 Bitcoin for the National Strategic Reserve. They did this by a hydroelectric dam that they had, and then, you know, trying to figure out what to do with that energy, they put it to Bitcoin mining. This was years ago. Now it represents, again, like 48% of their GDP. This is really cool. Also, another fun fact, Bhutan doesn't really measure their GDP in the same way, right? Gross domestic product. They look at gross domestic happiness, and they're trying to kind of pave a new road for how humanity has a relationship with its economy and its people. Now we're getting into like newer things. Obviously, we have a Jan 8th posting. Czech Republic, Czech National Bank considers buying Bitcoin as a reserve asset. Back to Bhutan, sure, very amazing. Then you get into like the kind of insanity that I'm really trying to push here, which is New Hampshire introduces a strategic Bitcoin reserve bill. And Texas, oh my God, so you can definitely see that there's a split, and obviously with Trump being very pro crypto, that's quite amazing to see. You know, red states following suit. Now, one thing I want to hop into also, and this is fairly bullish, for anyone who's unaware, the Biden regime, and I did vote for Biden. I'll be very transparent with everybody on this channel. I've been a Democrat my whole life. It's been extremely wild to watch somebody that I've supported attack something that I've been so deeply involved in. This is actually a first in my life, and it's definitely impacted my political position. And I think I'm seeing many of my peers, often libertarians, but being a little bit confused as to what's going on. And what happened was that Gary Gensler, as the chair of the SEC, the FDIC, and who are basically controlling the banking structures, there was a cabal, which is now being designated as Operation Chokepoint 2.0, that attempted to debank a lot of crypto companies. So that's been a really fascinating problem. The companies that I have both worked for and the advisory projects that I have worked with have all experienced debanking. Just to be really quick about that, what does it mean? It means you wake up one day and your bank says you can no longer bank here. It takes a lot of work in the crypto industry to see who will support you and just give you a savings account. And as you can imagine, it's very hard to do business without a bank account, right? Where do you send the cash? How do you do it? So what's really crazy here is that without a bank account, you really can't move forward. Now, we are trying to recreate an entire world in which we can function with stablecoins and do all of this on-chain. But for the moment, I will say it's a bit of a struggle and it's very confusing under the Biden administration. Now, in regards to the unbanking, Nick Carter, again, I recommended that you followed him yesterday, but he's actually been leading the approach on trying to reveal some clarity around what he calls Operation Choke Point 2. And what is going on with that is that Coinbase has actually sued the US government in a variety of ways and has actually forced through the court of law to get a lot of clarity. Now, what's really interesting to me is that we have the new FDIC chair coming in, and he's basically saying closely related to the agency's recent approach to digital assets is the problem of debanking. Over the past few years, there have been various accounts of individuals and businesses associated with the crypto industry losing access to banks without explanation, right? This is happening and now coming from the inside out. So we have a very bullish marker that basically says to the industry, hey, the US government is not only going to just stop assaulting you. That's step one. But we're actually seeing, as you go up the ladder in the government all the way to the presidency, a warming of attitudes. Traditionally, over the past 4 years, I have worked with founders. Everybody has had to build their company offshores. A lot of them have been taken via incentives or other reasons just out of fear of litigation in the United States, going to Singapore, going to Dubai. And it's been a real shame to watch people that are very patriotic and want to build technology here actually move away. So that's been something that's kind of a bummer. And I think this is one of the biggest catalysts that we will see now in the next coming years, is that the United States embrace of the cryptocurrency industry that allows more developers to build here. And people do want to build here. The Great Melting Pot is an amazing source of talent. And, the fear will be alleviated so they can start doing things that are more blockchain native. A lot of the onerous obligations coming from US regulations actually force people to remove some of the biggest benefits of blockchain, which is the decentralized nature and, of course, the lack of intermediaries, right? So this is all really, really interesting to me. Now, one thing to keep in mind as you get excited about the long-term bullishness of Bitcoin right now, we do have this Silk Road assets, and thank you to Rand for promoting this. But when we look at the Silk Road assets, and I talked about this yesterday, that they've been approved since December 30th to sell these 69,000 Bitcoin. We did just get a test transaction, which is generally a preface in crypto land for a send. Just generally speaking, if you're going to send it to somebody, you send a little bit of assets and you say, hey, did you get this? I just want to make sure it's the right address. They confirm that, and then you go the rest of it. So this is an implication that we could see sell pressure coming from the US government with the Silk Road assets. Luckily the thing is Bitcoin's finite and you can keep selling it, but you do run out eventually. And I would say to other nations like Bhutan and El Salvador and others that are looking to establish this Bitcoin reserve, we could be just seeing a standard trade mechanic of assets moving from weak hands to patient hands. So my assumption is this will be bought up, but again, a lot of the macro is involved in that. There are fears of taking out the lower lows, which would drop us down even farther. The last couple of attempts have actually been pretty well defended. If I go back to Bitcoin again, we're back at 95. I'm seeing it sort of bounce. 95 was a top. Let's go to the 4-hour real quick. And you can see over a 4-hour timeline, we're still on an uptrend. For anyone looking, these little candle wicks are basically a move up and then a retrace. So that's like a reach, if you will, and it wants to move. But again, there's so many important conditions to consider in this current market that I would just say, don't day trade or do anything. But if you guys do want to establish a position, these blood in the water moves are pretty fantastic. When you see everybody start to cry, it's always a good time to buy. You'll never feel bad buying the bottom. It does hurt quite a bit to buy the top when everybody's really excited, and then it just moves away from you. So that being said, this is kind of a look at the market right now. And it's my hopes that the weekend will prove to be fairly stable. Truthfully speaking, weekends do not have the institutional support of Wall Street. So the volatility increases and things are kind of a little bit more random. But if we can see some stability there, it could be very exciting. It could set a nice floor. And of course, we just need to hold on to our seats until January 20th when some more clarity comes out of something, just because the United States makes its big change and takes a step forward. With that, thank you guys so much. Have a great weekend and good luck out there.